Hey, so I'm Madam Forget Me Not. You may be seeing this on my Tumblr blog. You can also go follow me on Archive of Our Own, same name. But what I wanted to do is, I know I had mentioned on my side blog that I wanted to address some of the common issues that I'm seeing in the Lore Olympus tag right now. First of all, I have come to realize that our fandom has a really bad rep, which I didn't really know. I hadn't dived in too deeply. And then I started seeing a lot of complaints for it. So, first of all, I want to make it clear I'm not looking to trash on anybody. I'm going to refer to the anti Lore Olympus blog, but please understand, like, whoever's running that, I mean no ill will towards. I'm not trying to make this a big, like, war or whatever. Look, I'm in my 20s. I don't have time for that. I just don't. What I wanted to do though is I wanted there to be a healthy discussion. I think that's important, is to be able to have this dialogue, because I really do enjoy Lore Olympus. I want to consume media with it. I pay for the fast passes. I write fan fiction. Like, I'm into it. But that doesn't mean that I can't sit there and analyze the media and find what's flawed about it. However, I find that a lot of the things that I'm seeing complained about are either really subjective, or I think are people are searching for something to dislike. There's problems in every media, but I think that some of these are just grasping for straws. But either way, if I'm totally wrong, then I'm wrong, and I'm open to discussing that. I'm not looking for any attacks here. So one of the first things that I want to address as I look through, that I see common complaints both in people that have always been anti-Lore Olympus or that used to be fans of it and change, is the art style. So if you go back through my blog, you'll see at one point that I was talking about the change in art style and character design, and that I think that in part it's been deliberate. The other part is that I honestly think that this is one of those little nitpicks that it's so subjective. You either like a person's art style and how it grows, or you don't. If you were really into Rachel's art style in the beginning and you're like, this is fantastic, then yeah, you're probably not going to like the new stuff as much. For me, the art in the beginning was interesting, but I wasn't actually super fond of it. I liked it as it changed into what it is now. I like where Persephone is looking more and more mature. And I still hold to the fact that I do, in fact, believe that that is intentional to show that her growth was stunted by her mother, and now she's aging up more, that she's been in Olympus and has had everything happen. But that's my own personal interpretation. With this one, it's not this is problematic or not. If you don't like the art style, you don't like the art style, and that is fine. I just don't think that totally, like this, it doesn't just totally wreck the comic for me, even when I wasn't as fond of it. Beyond that, I've seen some complaints about how the coloring can blend in with the background, which, first of all, if you liked the original style and now you're complaining about that, I don't really get it, because that was way, way worse in the beginning. But second of all, I don't really have an issue with it. I honestly find it very compelling. I think it makes you focus more so on the characters than what's going on behind them. And that means that when she does pay more attention to the detail behind, then you're really like, maybe there's something more important going on. Like, I think about when Persephone's spring, like, it really showed that, and how much more dramatic the background was versus like this latest chapter where Zeus really blended into his bedroom. His bedroom isn't what mattered, but Persephone's spring did. And so that's why you're seeing that pop there. It doesn't matter to me that there isn't a huge amount of contrast when it's unnecessary. I'd rather us focus more on the plot than on the colors of, like, your closet. Okay, another one that I saw that is a common complaint is the use of sexual assault in the media. Now, trigger warning here, we're going to get into stuff about sexual assault. If you want to stop here and skip forward into the video, that is totally fine, but I think it's something that needs to be addressed. So on one hand, people are complaining that this doesn't go closely enough to actual mythology, which, if that's what you're looking for, if you're a purist, I get. But if you're looking at that, the story is literally called The Rape of Persephone. Now, I'm not going to sit in there. I've seen that apparently Rachel had said that at one point that there wasn't going to be sexual assault in this, and then there was, and I wasn't around early enough to speak to that, so I can't say anything about that. What I can say is that whether or not you think that it's appropriate depends, again, subjectively. I have been the victim of sexual assault. Seeing someone in media go through that where they can't necessarily speak up without hurting those around them, or they were so pressured into saying, okay, that you question, was this actually assault? Was this just all in my head? And watching that growth from there, that was actually so refreshing and helpful for me to see. That isn't going to be the universal experience of every sexual assault survivor, however, and I'm not going to pretend like it is. I get kind of frustrated when I see the blanket statements of, oh, well, people who experience this don't agree with it, because it doesn't apply to everybody. And in that same vein, I have seen a lot of people say that it's a very turfy piece of media. And don't get me wrong, like I don't support turfs. I used to be a huge Harry Potter fan, and those are off my bookshelves. I no longer support, J.K. Rowling or anything because of the problematic elements that I have seen and had pointed out to me. Now, can I recognize that there's a lot of dichotomy in masculinity versus femininity? Yes. I can also say that I look at characters like Eros, who is, for obvious reasons, pansexual, though that isn't addressed yet because Psyche right now is his main character arc. He is a much more fashion-driven, or what we would consider more feminine guy if you're looking at a binary, which I don't believe that gender is on a binary. And that doesn't seem to be an issue. Like, no one seems to treat him lesser. Now, I'm not going to sit there and try to speak for trans people. I'm a cis woman. That is not my place. I can say that I haven't heard many complaints from people who are trans or non-binary, or fall under those umbrellas. But again, that's not my place. I can only say what I've specifically heard. If you are a person who is trans or non-binary and you want to speak up more on this, I would absolutely love to hear it. From those that I've spoken to, it's not an issue, but that just because 2 or 3 people don't have an issue with it doesn't mean that it's not a problem in the media overall. So I would need to talk to more people where it would actually be about them. But as a person who is a sexual assault survivor and who is gay, I'm not seeing those issues for myself. Okay, another one that got me. This one I feel like it's kind of grasping, okay? People are apparently seeing Hades as a very anti-Semitic allegory because he's the god of wealth and owns the banks and also happens to have a large nose. First of all, Rachel's style shows most of the men having larger noses. So I don't think that was supposed to be some negative view towards Jewish people. Hades was going to be the god of wealth anyway, so it's not like she was like, okay, this person is going to be, just like this. He's not going to be this, or he's definitely going to be this allegory. I don't think there's enough proof there when so many of the other gods who, especially like if you look at his father, if you look at his brothers, anyone in that like kind of realm, and they have the same features. So I don't think that you can say that, yes, he's definitely an anti-Semitic allegory, because there's just not enough evidence there. Okay, so continuing to scroll through here, more complaints about art, more complaints. Okay, so here's one. I will argue until I have no more energy. Persephone is not a Mary Sue. Okay, and it has everything to do with the actual definition of the term. So I look it up. Mary Sue, originally in fanfiction, a type of female character who is depicted as unrealistically lacking in flaws or weaknesses. We have seen that Persephone has a ton of weaknesses. She has sat there and she is going through things and she's struggling. Does she actually have a lot of power? Yes. Is she working on developing that? Yes, it's not like it just came naturally. Like it was like all of a sudden it was like, oh, I can do all of these things. Her struggling with her powers is one of the most consistent issues that we see throughout the story. We are over 150 chapters in. That is what we're primarily seeing. Okay? And her growing in power, the other big complaint. Well, Hades and Persephone have to be stronger than everybody else. I can't really speak on that. Because we haven't actually seen the other gods give it their all. Now, Persephone, I will say that it is showing that she is depicted of great power. I will not contradict that. Is that happening just because she's the main character? I can't say. I know that Rachel has taken a spin on fertility goddesses that I've never seen in media before, and that isn't necessarily in line with whatever you want to consider Greek mythos canon. There's too many sources for it to be like totally canon, by the way. But that, if that's an issue for you, okay, I can respect that. I can see where you're coming from there. Persephone's not a Mary Sue. Okay, so the age gap thing. Age gap is a little weird. I'll give that to you. It is something that I have had to think in depth about and have come to the conclusion that it's just a part of it. When you look at the mythology, Persephone was originally Hades' niece and was also obviously younger than him. It never gave exactly how much. Do I try to keep this in context of maturity? Yes. Do I recognize that that isn't a good blanket thing in general? Also, yes. I don't believe that teenagers should be getting in relationships with 30 and 40-year-old people in real life. Do I think that this needs to be talked about because there are people who are younger in the audience? Absolutely. This is something to talk about. Was it originally off-putting for me? To an extent. But I am willing to sit there and say, okay, here is why I feel that way. It's fictional, and let's see what happens. And so far, the fact that they aren't even officially in a relationship, they're getting to know each other better. They're both maturing, that Persephone is going to be getting into therapy, that Hades is in therapy. Those are healthy things for me, because you can have an age gap in a relationship and still have it be healthy. You just have to really work on that communication and to make sure that power dynamic isn't such that one person, just because they're older, holds all the power. But that takes constant work, and it's very difficult. That's not saying that it is never good, or that it's, or that it's always bad, or it's always great. It solely depends on the people and the ways that they are willing to make sure that they are taking those healthy steps. Okay, as far as asexuality goes, first of all, it has been confirmed from all the sources that I've read that Hecate, however you pronounce her name, I pronounce it differently in my head each time, she is asexual. As far as it goes, where people being upset that Athena and Hestia have both been confirmed in a relationship, first of all, asexuality is a spectrum, okay? You can, in fact, have people who are ace in relationships. You can have them in relationships that even include sexual components. You can have them in a totally romantic relationship with no sex involved, even if they are sharing a bed. So just because we have seen them and confirmed that they are together does not mean that they are actually breaking their vows of chastity or celibacy. Beyond that, there's also the whole, if you look at the Greek, at the time, the Greek definition, and it involving not having men, people with penises involved, then that was therefore still remaining chaste. I don't know if I want to get into all of that, because that does get into some very transphobic elements, but I will say that we have had no confirmation that their romantic relationship is in fact sexual, so I don't think that we can cast judgment on that yet. But yes, there is confirmed ace representation. Okay, here's another one asking why the characters look so much alike if there's not incest. I will say that I think you can tell more so when characters are related, like you can extra tell they're related. But also it goes to character design and art styles. Like, I know plenty of people who have their own unique art style, and you can tell different characters from one another, but you're always going to see similar features. And honestly, that doesn't really bother me that much. I actually like the consistency, but that's just me. Again, if you don't like the art style, I can't make you like I can't convince you to like the art style. And convincing you to like something isn't my point with this. But if your main deal is complaining about the art, or complaining about, well, when this is based off of the myth of the rape of Persephone, how could they include sexual assault? Like I get before it was just kidnapping and, forcing her to be married and all of that, but guys. Ooh, the complaints about the recent chapter saying that Zeus let Kronos assault Hera. Okay, we have no confirmation of anything here. Okay, so I'm not going to sit there and cast judgment when we don't have the full story yet. And it wouldn't make sense for Rachel to give us all the details right now. That's how you keep people coming back for more. Now, have I found issues with pacing of the story before? Yes. Was I frustrated towards the beginning of season 2 due to the pacing? Yes. But I also feel like it's gotten a lot better recently, and I'm not going to sit there and begrudge the fact that we've been left on cliffhangers, because that's just kind of what is part of digesting media that comes out in serializations. Okay, here's a complaint that says that there's so little foreshadowing. I disagree. I've seen tons of foreshadowing, and this isn't just about the whole Kronos with the flower thing. I've seen it. I can't go into a bunch of details because, quite frankly, I just don't have the time to go dig all of that up. But I find it there. If you don't, then maybe it's just wishful thinking on my part. Let's see. I don't get why the writing in Lore Olympus refuses to let Persephone be dark and accepting of death or punishment, because isn't that what you need to show she's going to be a good queen? She seems terrified of the concept, keeps trying to reverse them. Okay. Persephone is freshly 20 years old. She is extremely, extremely sheltered. Okay, so she went from having totally closed off to all of a sudden being around a whole bunch of other stuff. She's seen her mother, who has taken in nymphs her whole life, and she's been in a very, yes, she had some issues with Demeter trying to be protective to the point of being controlling, and that's its own separate issue. But she's never been really exposed to how you handle people who do the worst things. And yeah, she's going to sit there and she's got a lot of that empathy. She's never known anything else. And in a way, I think it's very refreshing. I think that's what Hades needs to see right now. However, you also can't sit there and expect a 20-year-old to have a developed sense of justice. True justice comes in time. Now, there's also the whole issue of Hades and the Shades and using them for unpaid labor, which he deliberately said as, he made it a joke trying to get a rise out of Persephone and knew something was up when she didn't say anything. And I'm not going to say that's not problematic. Coming from a human perspective, and especially one where I'm from America, and we are obviously dealing with some really messed up stuff, okay? And I'm not downplaying that. In this scenario, I think it's foreshadowed, especially with her being upset about the stuff on the beach and everything else, that there are going to be reform changes. We just aren't there yet. Hades has been doing something for almost 2,000 years in a set way. He's cut off from a lot of that compassion. She's introducing that. So what I think is going to happen is eventually they're going to get married. You can already see the balance that they're bringing to one another. And that is what's going to lead the underworld in a better direction. But you have to have a place to start from first. If Hades were perfect, obviously he would have had a wife by now. This wouldn't be this big thing. They both are required to go through growth. Okay. So I think I covered some of the main things that I wanted to address. if you have any other comments, please, let me know. If I am totally incorrect about something, I'm willing to discuss that. Again, this isn't looking like for, there to be some like big fight about it, but I just think that if we're going to hear a lot of the anti stuff, which is fair, like go do your thing, I think that we also need to have a discussion about why some of us disagree with what's being said. And again, I'm not saying Lore Olympus is perfect. It's not. And I think it's important to be able to recognize those issues. And I think it's important to recognize where there can be growth. But I do not think it is right to judge an unfinished work as though we are looking at a finished product.